Just a quick one, Jack. Jace wants to.
Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. Just quickly, Jack, I remember us having a phone call last week about me talking for tomorrow, Friday thing. Just quickly on that, I'm actually playing Cronulla at 2:45, so I won't be around for the meeting, unfortunately.
Why don't you kickstart us before we jump into failure time? Just talk us through a little bit of the learning you've been going through, because this is going to be recorded and shared on failure time. So it's your own failure time experience, and share what how you've approached it and how you're feeling through the process.
Yeah, cool. No worries. As of late, I suppose I've had to grow tremendously as a person and a professional. I think, as a 20-year-old Aboriginal kid from Jervis Bay, who I suppose isn't necessarily meant to become or be known as successful within society. I feel like I've learned a lot in my role in terms of how to be a professional and work collectively as a team. I suppose where I grew up, there is a lot of I'd say banter always growing up, and that's how it is, I suppose, growing up in an Aboriginal community. It's always you're always around family and your cousins and all that, so you're always bantering. But I had to learn how to transition that into a professional space, and it took me a long time until I figured out how to do that. And I feel like I have grown with the team around me, and they've played a massive role in the professionalism I have today. And it was scary that I had to, sit down and actually reflect on, my life as a kid to now. And I suppose, the unknown is scary, but you've got to just jump in the deep end, and you never know what you can get out of it. So I feel, having done that and have experienced the things that I have so far this year within the team and all of that stuff, I'm very grateful to have, you at the top J&B doing what you do, and everyone else around Australia, absolutely running the AIME magic. And I suppose I owe the professionalism and what's running through my veins, having had AIME filter through me as a kid. So I don't know if there's anything else I feel that you want me to touch on J&B, but
no, I think it's pretty honest, Jace. From my end, I'm more than happy always to give people a chance. Like I'm having a few of these combos at the moment because we're going so fast, and the expectations are so high that it's sort of like Jakey said in his proclaim piece. Like we don't really have the capacity to carry people anymore. And stay honest with yourself, and then the potential for growth is really limitless. And I just, I will not ever forget you as that 15-year-old kid when we were doing the other election and being in that room and then going to Canberra and watching all you guys. And I just think watching that adjustment coming in, being in the org and the different levels of requirements and that self-awareness is something that I think it's been a good lesson for me, and wants me to I want to keep learning and being really self-aware. So keep doing it would be my message, and I think it was a good one to share with the group and leaning into those. So, thank you, Jace. All right, let's do a failure time Q&A. Maybe just pick me a really good couple of questions, which actually has given me an opportunity to find out how we can clarify a few of the expectations around failure time and how the design looks. So if you want to chuck yourselves on mute if you're not talking, that'd be great. And then maybe we'll kick us off, and then we'll roll into it. We'll go for about half an hour. So if you've got any questions about failure time, either for the mentor training or for afterwards, feel free to dive into it and kick us off maybe from the West Coast. Let's go.
Hey guys. So like Jack said, I sort of chucked him a message in regards to prepping for mentor training, and then even it's slightly veered towards mentee failure time as well. But the main concern, or not so much concern, but area where I was a little bit unsure of how to navigate was placing cultural awareness in like a failure time space where, like, coming from like being an Aboriginal woman and the language of opportunity thing, having something so important placed in like a failure time space sort of can be misinterpreted a little bit, I think. So if there was a space where you could do the failure time where you're learning the fun stuff about culture and this and that, and then also if you had like a separate time that, like, maybe two failure times, maybe two failure times and then one like culture time where you go over the things that the mentors need to be aware of, like the different like law and like kinship and the things that they need to be aware of when they're around mentees. And I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so it was sort of just trying to navigate the language between failure time and cultural awareness, I guess. Yeah. No. But yeah, I don't know.
On mute, Jack.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's an excellent question. Like, it's because what it does is ask us really a fundamental question before we even get into the question mark around cultural training, around where do we weight failure time. So I want to answer both, Mabel, because I think they're two really important ones for us to clarify. And first, also I want to encourage you to keep asking questions. So this is how we build the organisation everywhere. Vitali, I think, has popped on from South Africa. So the whole design of what we do here, we do together. So keep being brave enough to be able to ask questions, because that's how we co-design and we build. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Get everyone on mute, please.
Thanks, Brando. Steph, I think we might chuck you on mute if you're not already, or maybe I just muted you anyway. Okay. So the failure time piece, the first thing I'd clarify moving forward is failure time is not fun. That's not what the objective is. So that's not the throwaway 20 minutes for us. Failure time is the most important thing we do. And so what we're trying to do is to showcase for kids that this is where learning happens. So you'll see some of the areas that were suggested on the How I Do Failure Time channel are expert. And again, like, I wouldn't say because they're outside our knowledge base doesn't mean there's not really deep repositioning of the neural pathways happening when we're challenging people to imagine new realities. So by painting someone's nails might seem like a throwaway learning experience, but what you're actually doing is every time that the neurons go into a new place together, you build a new pathway and it becomes a new cognizant bridge of knowledge of which other things can move over the top of it in between the way our brains work. And so what I see failure time as, and our fundamental job is to work out how we frame that and understand that. So I think this is a good moment to really test it, because I haven't ever said before the sentence that failure time is our most serious opportunity for learning. That's where we put our most serious content. AIME TV in many ways that's our opportunity to have a softening of the audience and have a collective experience. If you've ever been to a cinema together, put your hand up if you've ever been on a first date. Anyone ever gone to the movies? And you go to the movies because then you have something to talk about. Why AIME TV is at the top is it suddenly gives something for us to talk about, a common shared experience. It's a bonus if we get wisdom and we get knowledge to come out of it, but that's part of the heart of the design there at the start base. Activity time in the middle then allows us to consolidate that knowledge, and I'll get to mentor training in a moment. Activity time allows us to consolidate knowledge, and Rhea and Anthony, I might throw to you guys if you get a moment to reflect on your experience with the design this year round as well. And then failure time for me is the most important moment. That's where we put our most important learning. So in terms of localizing it, I think absolutely, like, core center, that's where we can do some of our most important experiences for people to learn. Now, how do we look at cultural awareness training at AIME? From the beginning, we've never been able to encapsulate the whole of the Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander experience for every person that comes in. We've never been able to do it. Now, we've gone all the way. We had a full day of cultural training early. We've had online training tools. We've had localized focus training happening in different elements. And what I want us to be able to do, and what I think gives us a repeatable framework, is to say, right, we're going to create AIME as a safe space where any question can be asked. Not necessarily where we'll be able to answer any question, but if you're not Indigenous or you're not from the cultural background of the kids we're working with, I want AIME to be the safe place for a question to be asked. That's what we do in those first 2-hour blocks at mentor training. It's not the end. And by, it's not where training and understanding of working with Aboriginal people stops. No way. Where it continues to happen after that beginning of asking questions and getting a primary understanding of what the experience looks like in each local area is then we have the chance to build trusting relationships. Now, that's what we're trying to build and educate with our non-Indigenous, or when we're working with white mentors in South Africa or working with people of different backgrounds in Uganda. We're looking for people who don't come from the same background as you and me, Mabel, and even our background is really different within the confines of an Aboriginal experience, as it's different for Tony or Benny or Tamika or different people around the country. So what we're trying to do is say, what's a foundation that we can commit to delivering? It's not the end. It's not the end of the experience. And where I believe that we create the greatest possible cross-cultural educational training is through human relationships, which all of us are a great case study of. It's through getting to know the personal stories of people that we work with. And that's how I look at the educational experience happening throughout that course of time. It is not devaluing, it's not devaluing a local experience if we position and frame failure time with the significance of weight of what it's designed for, which is it's our most important time for learning, and it's the safest possible space that we can enter into the most complex challenges and the most complex learning, of which cross-cultural education and understanding people from different cultural backgrounds has to be arguably one of the most complex learning opportunities we have. So that's how I'd look at it as designing it, and how I'd look at explaining why we do it and why it's in that fashion. So I'm happy to answer other questions, or Mabel, if you've got a follow-up, happy to answer questions as well.
Not a follow-up so much as like just trying to gauge your perception again on like we're trying to uplift our young Indigenous kids or whatnot, and we're trying to see, like, get them to see the value in themselves. Why? Steph. Yeah, so we're trying to get them to see the value in themselves. But from my understanding, which obviously is not right or wrong, the value in that comes from their cultural identity and the understanding that they have of their like grandfathers and great grandfathers and whatnot. So I just wanted to maybe see where you, like, your idea of like helping them see their value, and like where do we come into play with?
Yeah, I can absolutely explain that. Now the headline is for what we do is if the kids have got to see their identity as a point of strength and not a point of weakness, that it's a really good thing to be who they are and where they come from. And that's been consistent through everything that I've done every single time I've worked with a child or worked with AIME since 2005. So the strength-based approach about it being a good thing to be Indigenous is arguably the greatest gift that we can give by consistently turning up and believing in them. The secondary piece...
Hello. Are you... I'm just on a video. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Have we got Kira? Is there someone on the phone?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just trying to find mute. Hang on.
You're all right.
Oh.
So I'd say Mabel, it's a primary key part of what we do. Like there's no moving away from it. I don't think that this model works if we don't uplift kids to be proud of who they are. What was that, sorry?
Sorry, we weren't really sure if you were frozen or not.
No. Have you got another question or a thought on that, or is it you're unsure?
Could you just explain that again? Sorry.
There's no way AIME works without saying to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids that who they are is a good thing, repeatedly, every single time we see them. That their culture is a position of strength, that it's something, that it's the most valuable asset they have, that it's their point of resilience, that it is in Australia, that the story arc, there's 60,000 years of history of which these guys can land on. In South Africa, we've got kids that have been told that just because of where they're born, that they're going to fail. But the reality is that they come from a bloodline of the beginning of human history, that what we're telling is the stories of our history and our shared history, but actually recasting a storyline which is positive, which sees these kids' futures as a positive destiny. Now, the piece I will say, and I think I can say it fairly, and I don't want it to be seen at all as being defensive, and I hope that you're finding, this whole process open and you're having a chance to explore how it's working, is that it's been one of the common easy jumps internally that people will jump to very quickly if they're seen at the window where I've said something where culture isn't the only thing that we do. Now, it's not. It's not the only thing we do. And AIME is always going to be a place where we do lots of things, where we try and open lots and lots of different worldviews. That doesn't mean by saying that I suddenly disregard the key tenet of the kid's identity being a point of strength. Now, I want them to be really strong in who they are and to be able to play ball in both worlds. I want both those things. And there's a plural existence that we're allowed to have. We can have a multifaceted existence, and I believe AIME can offer that as well. So I'd also ask, as we work through the design process, to trust a little bit in the vision of the program and the experience, to give it the best go we can once we understand it. So that's why I think your questions are really good, because they're focused around a couple of key suggestions, and I think that's why it merited the chance to try and work through the conversation. And then hopefully that gives you a deeper understanding as to why we're doing it, because there's no point you being up the front or working with people going like, I don't understand how this thing works. So that's that'd be my explanation from a couple of your points.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would that sort of still is a bit blurry to me is I get going into the room and being like, Indigenous equals success. They need to hear it. They don't hear it enough. But I know for some of the mentees, going in there and saying that isn't always enough. A lot of them don't have enough knowledge on their background to understand why saying that is important. Yeah,
absolutely, Mabel. And I'll let me ask a couple of questions. How many program days do we have for Year 9 and Year 10?
5.
How many days are there in the year?
365.
How many days are you employed to be working for AIME with kids?
365.
How much time do we have with tutor squads in schools?
Every week.
What about interviews? How many do we interview every kid?
We hope to interview every kid.
Do we have the opportunity to present at school assemblies?
Yes.
Do we have the opportunity to run events and be in staff rooms and change the perceptions of teachers? Yep. Do we have the opportunity to talk to parents and be at NAIDOC week and be at local events and participate in that fashion?
We do.
So it's a whole game. And also there's kids. So there's 3 hours of contact during a program day, but there's also an hour break for lunch, a half an hour break for recess, and about half an hour before and half an hour afterwards. That's another 2 hours of one-on-one mentoring for that kid, or the 5 or 6 kids or the 7 kids for you to grab aside and go, oh, if you don't know where your family's from, it could be a good thing to follow up, or what's your local lingo, where's your mob from, or what's your totem, or what's your story, or, oh, I know you, you're a walker, or you're this, and help them feel that sense of kinship and that sense of community. That happens through one-on-one mentoring. That can't ever be achieved through one blanket design across an international model. But what we can do is provide the key elements and the times for that to work with the individual follow-up. So it's a very comprehensive, layered set of levels to build up the kid's identity, because as you know as much as anyone, it doesn't happen from one headline or one interview, but with the interview, with activity times, with the show starting on the sidewalk, and all those things we do on those program days, that's only 5 days, but that might give us a rocket ship to get going. That might get them up to 25, 30% in year 1. And then we've got year 10, and then we've got year 11, and then we've got year 12. So it's 4 years, which are, 1,200 days throughout the course of that time. So reinforcing the kid's sense of strength of who they are, that is the reason why this works. Identity, to thine own self be true, is why I spoke to it in the AIME Institute when we were all together. That is, I think, the centrifugal force of what makes AIME work. And the more that we can be exploring that, and the more we know about who we are and where we come from, not just being Aboriginal actually, but everyone, the more we know about who we are and where we come from, the better and more grounded we are in this life as human beings. So I think it's a really, really critical part of the design. And failure time, I'd say again, to loop back full circle, is our most important place. It's not a play place. It's a really, really serious intervention, which is why Benny and I have both added notes in there today to show what can happen with 3 to 5 minutes worth of thinking. If we really want to be engaged with that depth and use those moments, they are there. It's a playground for us to keep building those story arcs to achieve everything that you've listed in those questions. Can absolutely work in that space if we frame failure time in the appropriate measure. And let's be clear, it's a challenge. People see failure as a bad thing. We see what Bianca said on the drum during the week. We see failure as a bad thing. So it doesn't mean that we're not trying to change people's perceptions or challenge that. But if we can explain it, we can bring people along a journey to a new, safer space where those kids who know heaps about their identity feel strong and proud in failure time. Those kids who don't know a lot can have a space, and it allows us to manage the variety of unique individual stories we have coming through.
Okay, yeah, that clears it up a little bit.
So I'd say in response to can we design it differently? No. Because I think there's still the opportunity for us to apply it much more effectively. And I said at the start of the year, failure time is the area where we really dropped the ball last year, because we saw it as like a throwaway moment as opposed to the key moment for localization and for really getting into a local experience for that kid, which the centrifugal force of that is the kid's identity. So to Jace, to your question on Slack, absolutely I see identity and culture and language being a key part, but then having a story arc where we also have other experiences through the failure time piece, purely and simply so it's not boring, as a fundamental thing. So we're not just doing the same thing. The way we have the way we can make the way we can penetrate with impact is by having diversity of experience. So then when the really meaningful stuff around, sitting down with that elder comes around, those kids are so jazzed that they've been moving around, they've, painting their nails in a different spot, and then they're ready, they're completely focused for those 7 minutes, and then they can move on to the next one and we build it up. So that's why diversity of experience is really important in failure time as well. I'll shut up and throw it back open to you guys. Mabel, does that answer what you were looking for from your question when you wrote to me?
Yeah, I think it clears up most of it. It sort of gives me something to think about and go away and kind of see what I can really shuffle and play around with. But yeah, for the most part, it's sort of cleared up. Okay, well, let's start with that, and then if you've still got more clarifications as a group, let's work through it. So I'll open it up to everyone else and see if there's any other questions, and we can go from there. But thank you, and thank you for, it's brave to do what you're doing in front of this group and to ask those questions and to try and work through things on the run. So let's keep working through it and find out the best possible solutions we can for the design of the thing. So thank you. All right, any other questions, team?
Jack, can I jump in, mate?
Yo.
Reiterate what you're saying. So this has come from, we've had discussions at the Curtin office here and over here in the West with just where we're at in terms of cultural awareness training, I guess, is how it all popped up. In that regard, can you maybe comment on you spoke about us having that show starts on the sidewalk, all those extra days. That's all good and well for our staff. Are we comfortable that the mentors are going to be there's their own safety, and that they're going to be confident enough to do it if there's no actual training on that side of things?
Well, there is training on that side of things. So that's the piece. Failure time is that training opportunity in the program days. So you're looking at 40 minutes worth of real localized focus around, what are the key principles the kids need to understand, these university students need to understand before working with Aboriginal kids. And so that's what we're doing. So that's there. I'd say there's absolutely a key focus moment on it. And then let's see. We've got the ability to respond and go like, okay, let me also say that we have a much stricter recruitment and an induction process for mentors than we've ever had before. So part of what we should be doing is filtering people through that don't require necessarily as much training as we might if we didn't know them. So we've done an interview with people, they've read a book, they've done a book report. So we have a much broader understanding in that. And I'll also say that in the book, there's about 50 pages on Aboriginal history and Australian history, and including my own story of identity and working through those challenges. So I think that gives an element, not the total package, an element. I think then the interviews allow us to get a sense of the people that we're going to select. And then when we move into that 2-hour block, that then gives us the opportunity to look at localising it through some really focused failure time opportunities there. And then off the back of that, if you still feel like there's a need for a specific group, now again, the specific group, because there might be 7 mentors who are brand new. There might be 35 who are awesome, who get it. You're like, okay, we can bank on them. They get on the bus to Kalgoorlie all the time. They're sorted. But there might be 7 or 8 people who have never worked with Aboriginal kids before, who you think, look, it would be really great if we could get the local elder to come down, or Uncle Noel Menup to come down and tell them a bit of a story for a couple of hours. We're going to invite them to a lunch with Uncle Noel Menup, and that's going to be a mentor engagement activity. Absolutely do that. Like there's nothing in me that says don't do that, ever. Or we're going to invite you to a Welcome the Country or a NAIDOC event and help you keep learning. Absolutely. How did you guys all learn? How have I learned more? By doing, by getting in the world and doing, and by being around people. So it's not going to stop after that 2-hour block. But I do confidently believe that if we follow those stepping stones, we'll have a good sense that we have mentors who can be, at bare minimum, open to understanding that the kids they're working with are not the same as them, and to backing the program. If we do that, I think we've got a good start base. And that's the fundamental to get going. And then we respond with pre-briefs, there'll be post-briefs afterwards like we've always done, and a chance to keep moving with the option of building some more catered stuff locally for each group you work with. Does that answer that, Jace? Do you think that's fair? Or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep.
This is good, guys. Keep them coming. It's a good time to ask this stuff as we're about to head into it. So if there's anything that's not making sense or you want clarified, let's have a go around the failure time piece. And if there's anything you want to ask around the cultural awareness training and how we model it, happy to answer that as well.
Hey, Jack, it's Lane. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to touch on that cultural stuff, because like over the years since I've been here, it's each person has kind of seen it differently at each site. We've all done it differently, and I think that was your main one there is do what you need to do at your site. So people need to be comfortable to do what you need to do. So outside of what AIME gives you, if there's more that needs to be done, there's plenty of time in which you can do that. But one of my big things was, and we did it a fair few years ago, but we're a mentoring program. We're not a cultural program. Like, we're not there to replace the local community who have their own cultural knowledges, their own law, their own history. And yeah, we work with kids who've been affected by colonisation and all that kind of stuff in the stolen generation. But I really don't and this is a personal thing for me, I don't think it's AIME's role to walk into that territory too much. Yes, it is to make people culturally safe. Jace, I get what you're saying, making sure that it's a culturally safe place for the mentors. And I've had a mentor, ask a kid, does he go and do dance and wear his lap on the weekends and stuff like that. And really stupid stuff when you think objectively about it. But so there is moments there where you need to say things to some people, but for the most part, people get it if they're a part of AIME, but it's a really tricky space, especially if you walk into AIME as a newbie and you've got cultural protocols or community protocols that you're walking into. So I really get where you're coming at it, but also it's good to listen to what Jack's saying and then really reflect on how you can actually embed cultural stuff in your day-to-day life. Like, you can do it just by walking and breathing. It can be in every mentoring interaction. Oh, you don't know who your mob is? That's cool, mate. Like, we can work on that. I can help you with that. Boom. Work on 20 million things that you're mentoring you on or her on. Like, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. Same with the mentors, you know. You notice that there's some dude that's a bit funny. You're going to have to do a bit more extra work with that guy. Like, it's part of the game. Like, we're playing a really long game here. It goes for 6-7 years. And if we do our jobs, it's going to change our lives for the rest of our life. Mentors and mentees.
Thanks, Lane.
Is that Jack? Is that still a thing? You know, we're a mentoring program. Hey, not a cultural program. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
We're just doing the best we can. Like, we're not going to be able to replace. We're never going to be able to educate on everything to do with Australia or Aboriginal Australia or everything. But we can absolutely try and build a strong foundation. And I think you've touched on it there. We're opening doors, and we're opening doors for knowledge, and we're the start base for knowledge to be able to keep building. And that's what this training experience, as we get to the mentor training experience, is meant to do. It's meant to make a safe space and a space where mentors want to keep turning up. They understand the commitment and they understand some fundamentals about, what are some things in failure time? What are 5 things you never say to an Aboriginal kid? Let's go around one group. What are 5 things that you should know about the area? What's it like working with Aboriginal kids? They're things which are not going to be ever hard and fast rules. And as to Lane's point, there's cultural awareness orbs which been working for 20, 30 years trying to do this full time and still don't have like a perfect answer. You can go and sit in one of them and someone will walk out and go, oh, they missed that, or they missed that. Absolutely. You're not going to be able to ever capture 60,000 years worth of history, but we can provide a safe space. If we provide a safe space and frameworks and boundaries, I think we've got a good shot. And I do believe that this design gives us the best chance we've ever had to achieve the total package experience for as many possible kids and as many possible university students as we can. So thanks, Lane. That I understood where you were coming from. What else, team? This is really good. Keep coming.
Hey, Jack, just in terms of maybe some of us have relationships with the university where it's in our partnership agreements that we'll be conducting ourselves in culturally safe ways. Now, I get what you're saying with this, our cultural awareness training kind of falling to the side for this year and us doing that more in every interaction rather than a formal interaction. But do you have a way for us, maybe some quick fire tips in those of us that need to deal with and manage expectations of the community and of the university partnership as well? How would you suggest we commence that discussion on what AIME is actually doing around cultural awareness?
Yeah, for starters, I'd say that we are absolutely not putting cultural awareness to the side. You guys have been going and interviewing every single kid. You can't know the kids more intimately than going and interviewing them one-on-one to know your audience. So once you go and interview them, when you then work with the mentors, you can explain what the kids are like that we're working with. That's how we do it. Where we can get really big terms like the universe. Like, can someone explain the universe to me? I can't explain the universe to you in 2 sentences. I couldn't do it in an hour. I couldn't do it in 2 hours. I can't explain like the speed of light. I can't explain culture in an hour. You can't ask me to do that. Like, it's impossible. It's an impossible challenge. But what we can accurately do is we can explain what the lives of these kids are like that we're working with. Because we get to know them almost as well as anybody else outside of the family and outside of the schools. So our job is to know these kids. And our job is to try and pass that knowledge on to the kids that we're working with. It just so happens that many of us were these kids. So that's a pretty good start base. And when we were these kids, we have a pretty good informed framework. And then we have a set of rules that allows us to give these kids the best chance to meet university students from a different world. And the university students the best chance to prepare for it. So the culture of the area is populated by the people that live in the area. If I was to live in this house in Bulli for 50 generations, there'd be stuff that we'd learn. There'd be stuff that 50 generations from now, they'd be like, oh, my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather said never step on that step. There's stuff that happens, culture happens through people living and passing on knowledge. And that knowledge is a lived experience and allows us to keep it alive. That's my best go at explaining the universe. But I'd say, Tal, like, how are we culturally respectful? Well, for one, we think every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person is a good person. That's our start base. We have the highest possible expectations for all Indigenous people. We go into every interaction expecting the best. That's our beginning. We want to give power, as much power as we can to Indigenous people in Australia. We want to give as much power for the other guys internationally to these kids that haven't had it before. That's our whole objective. So if we can't be more driven at a core principle around trying to lift up, trying to be as culturally supportive, trying to be as supportive as possible for a group of people who haven't had power before. And then where it gets a little bit more complicated, to answer your question, Tyler, is we all have different stories of coming into it. So you can bring your personal story of I've worked as a mentor for 4 years. I've done this. This has been my experience. I've left. I got in the car and I drove down 2 states, and this is why I'm here. And I know these 7 family members, and these are people guiding me, and so's Uncle Lionel Bamblett and these people that are advising us when we catch up with them. Sometimes they give us a slap around the wrist, like it comes from knowing people. That's why I employ you guys, to know people and to be that connector between information, to help be an informed guide and an informed lead mentor. What I think we can do from design is provide the best possible avenues for us to have impact with that information when we're communicating it both to the mentors and mentees. And that's why the model is designed the way it is.
Yeah.
You there, Tal? Oh, I got you, sorry.
No, I was just giving you a thumbs up. Thanks for explaining that. I've taken a few notes, and yeah, that's good. I think, especially, framing us, I suppose, as the people on the ground, the connectors of people, it's kind of probably our job to communicate what you're saying and managing those relationships, and really like driving home the fact that we are mentors, and that's at the crux of our cultural training, is the fact that we know each and every kid's story, and we're going to behave in a sensible way, and we're going to train our mentors to do that. Am I sailing in the right direction there?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we try and make the big small. Like we try and paint a picture of the big history that happened, and have an informed group. And then we try and get small and focus on the individual needs of every individual person we're working with, because everybody knows that it's really impossible to have a blanket policy that works for every single person. So our way of mitigating that is to have a completely individualized, tailored experience for each kid and for each university student as much as we possibly can, by knowing them intimately. So I think that allows us for people to understand, okay, how do you work and how do you make the place safe for kids? We've got a bunch of rules around our child protection. We have the highest possible expectations. And then we actually do provide, an hour worth between both failure time slots, an hour worth of pre-training around localization, which is put into a failure time space. So it's safe for our university students to come in and ask a question for someone who doesn't feel that confident to ask a question. And then we have our local people on the ground. Like there's experiences within the mentor training where you get the chance to work through rules and work through different local stories and explain, the beginning of mentor training is me throwing to four people in the room in the 2-minute slots. Now you can look at that and go, Jack hasn't said this is cultural training. But cultural training, I would say, would be the first person that jumps up is you, Mabel, and going, this is my story and this is what it means for me and this is what my life has been. And you tell that story. And then the next person jumps up is another Indigenous mentor, or someone says, well, this is also my story. And the third one goes, Jason, this is my experience working with Aboriginal people. Here's the 3 rules I've learned. You've done the beginning of cross-cultural training, which is sharing our stories with each other. And AIME was always and has always been a really safe space for questions. Like I can tell you, I've sat in rooms with some of the most offensive people you could ever imagine, and I've tried to always educate a room and wear that myself, which sucks. But it's a safe space for questioning as well. So I think it's not a one-way directive with that explanation. It's an ongoing learning experience where we're constantly building relationships together and forging them, which to Lane's point takes time. Does that answer your question, Tal? Does that give you enough to feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I think it does, definitely. And I think the other leaflet of that is I'd be keen to know what people are doing around the country as well in terms of other incidental ways that they can educate their mentors and things that run adjacent to the mentor training, you know, extra opportunities we give the mentors through emails and in person and during mentor engagement, that kind of stuff. I'd love to see what everyone's doing around the country, maybe on Slack or something. But yeah, no, definitely.
That makes sense, Tal. And we could do that in the How I Do Mentors channel. And you've just triggered me into something which I don't think I've ever explained before, but you've got it out of me. We're subtle. We're subtle. That's how we do this. We're subtle. You know, Indigenous Carnival at Sydney University, when I was selling it, started was, do you want to come hang out with blackfellas? Do you want to come and do this thing on National Sorry Day? When I stuff this, do you want to come to the best party on campus, which has almost been sold out? Now, what happened for 900 people there, most of them have never met an Aboriginal person before, they were suddenly in a room with about 100 other blackfellas and they were watching Aboriginal performers and they hadn't even thought about it. We're the subtle group. We're the one that slowly, incrementally changes it by building relationships with people. So whilst it might not seem, because it's not necessarily labelled in a time slot, like with failure time, it's everywhere. It's throughout the whole DNA. It's the centrifugal force of this whole thing is relationships between people of difference. And we're subtly facilitating that to happen all the time, from school assemblies, from interviews, from mentor interviews, from sharing a book, from watching AIME TV, from telling the stories on Facebook, from sharing Sunday kindness, from going out into schools, from knocking on parents' doors, from being at AECGs, from the way we pack down our chairs. We're showing people that we care and we're building that whole relationship. So I'd say there's a subtlety to the way that we're traversing as the middle trapeze artist in between these two different forces, that we're trying to consistently just bring everyone along little by little, conversation by conversation. We're not going to come up blanketly and say, this is how it exists, because I don't think there's one central truth to how humanity should always exist together. But what I do believe is a central truth that AIME's based on is that relationships between difference can make us stronger.
Just on that, Jack, I feel like down in SA we've done a fair bit of cultural training, especially last year, rolling into sessions. And I agree with you that no one's ever going to be culturally competent and know everything about culture. But what I do feel is that we do need to create a safe space for the kids. And we do have a lot of mentors who have never engaged with Aboriginal people before. I feel that we do need to do some sort of cultural, it might not be awareness or but cultural safety for mentors before they come into a session. Just because you don't want an incident like with Lane, where, a question was asked of a kid. And, it's not on. And I guess that's just my personal view. And I feel like we just probably should have some sort of cultural safety prior to a session.
Yeah, I think you bang on. I agree with you. And so the design for the mentor training this year is to actually put in like 2 designated slots with failure time where you go nuts, have the richest possible experience ever. Like I see that being done well is, you've got your start base first lessons of, here's the 7 things you should never say, which I've been told, happened when I was on a football field. Please never say this to an Aboriginal kid, from you. And then, Rianne, here's the 6 things you should never say, which I've experienced as an Aboriginal student. Then you go to someone else who's a local elder who's there, can say, look, here's our story, and I'll tell you our story in a short space of time. And you walk through that convo from that failure time experience is then that's going to build all the way through. That's a start. Every time you send an email to someone, the next block you share a bit of your story. Like I wrote that book to help educate people about our experience and through my lens as an Aboriginal person to talk about identity and whatnot. So how we share story is continuous, I'd say. So absolutely agree. It should happen at the start. And let's be clever within the framework of our design to build within it. Just like getting Lego pieces, you get the Lego pieces, you can build infinite amounts of structures from the Lego pieces. The Lego pieces don't constrain us if we're open to the ability to build with them. And so I think I agree with you. I want safe mentors. I want people who you know, if you've got 30 or 40 of them that you interview and you go, man, these ones are great, I love their energy, but my Lord, they're rookies, we need to give them something else, then plug them into a local cultural awareness thing, either with the university or someone you know, or run an extra 1 hour failure time session with them, you know, or get them in an hour and a half before the first day. So you can do that. You can get rookies ready. But what I don't want to design is something that almost has the lowest possible expectations. Like, I want to give space for people who know stuff as well, and people who have that capacity. So I'm trying to design what's the fundamental basics, you know, and once we get that, then we build it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Cool.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Same page. We're on the same page.
Jack, it's Liv here. This was just an idea. Is maybe some of this cultural stuff something we could add into like a Mentor X opportunity as like an ongoing throughout the year? You know, if they're with Mentor X, like we're just sending them little info bites or some good resources that they can kind of just read or use along the way of their mentoring experience, and that's another opportunity that we can offer them.
Yeah, like absolutely. And I'd say it like I'd love there to be how do I phrase this without sounding like a grumpy old man? But I'd love there to be a little bit of a nod to what we've already done. Like, we've just released a book which has got 35 kids' stories and 7 or 8 Aboriginal authors who had never been published before sharing their stories, which is doing exactly that. And there's it's been free, made free for you guys, and 4 of you have picked it up. So I absolutely agree with you. I think the premise is there. We're doing it. You know, we're doing it on Sunday Kindness by sharing individual stories. Can we do it in Mentor X? Yes. Can we ask questions and think about the design of what we've done with a sense of the weight of what's already there and building on that? Maybe.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. That makes sense.
What else have we got?
I didn't know it was free, so I'll be jumping onto that train pretty soon.
Okay.
I think making the big small is really great to achieve like with the results, but I think going bigger, so Brendan and I had a chat about this. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot, like this cultural awareness, because we're presenting people with the problem and this is the solution. So whether it's giving them real history of that area, like I don't know a lot of my culture, it was all taken away, but there's still, you know, there's things in me that I know would have been with my great grandmother. So yeah, there's just things like that. So I think one of the things that Brendan said is like with us working with the uni students, if they're going to be going on to writing policy, managing mine sites in the area or anything, like they've had this layered in cultural awareness. It's not just a slideshow. You know, every time that they're with the kids, they can see, and I think a lot of that also is, I've seen someone put up some stuff about mentors like not being offended if they go into a room and the kids don't respond to them immediately, and that's about the layers. So yeah, I think I really think that what we're doing is groundbreaking compared to cultural awareness anywhere else.
And thanks, Steph. Like that's where I've sort of come at the design with it, which is it's a lived experience between people, and that's where I feel like the most effective learning happens if we can start with some principles to Mabel, to Anthony's point. I still think that's relevant. You know, if wherever possible we can have, you know, what are some checks and balances that we could go in with to have some expectations. I'm sure as many of you, you've sat in some cultural awareness sessions which are pretty average in terms of the advice you get, and some which have a couple that are really good with like, you know, here's the history, here's what you should know, here's some kickstarters. But it's a lived experience. You know, is valuing difference important to AIME and important to me? Absolutely. Is the design of the model to try and bring together 2 different people and facilitate a conversation? Absolutely. And that's how I think we continue to create growth, if we build that safety which we do from the way we lead that with our behaviours and our attitudes towards openness and difference, I believe. So, yes, just thanks, Steph, for saying that. Okay, I'll probably give it about another 10 minutes if anyone wants to ask anything that's burning, or you're not sure, or even if it's a half-cooked thought, feel free. I'm doing my best to be as open as possible with you. Hey, Rhiannon and Anthony, just remind you of the half an hour when you gave the keys to the kids in the classroom. We just had to sit there silently.
Hey, Jack.
Yo.
I don't really have so much a question, but basically, just from what I've been saying, so I've been engaging with a lot of the schools, and we've done about 150 interviews, and just through those interviews, talking with the kids about their heritage and their culture and where they come from, and getting an understanding. Like, there's a real key thing that comes across all of them is they know they're Aboriginal, but they don't know the history of their culture. They don't know the history of. So I spoke to these kids about, you know, the reason we have AIME, the reason why you guys have these university opportunities, because people like your grandparents walk down the streets of Sydney and they marched for your rights. They marched for, like, your rights to vote. They marched for your rights to go to university, to get a good education. And the feedback from a lot of the schools is they really want me to come out throughout the year and work with some of these kids. And I've got some material from when I used to be at O'Connor around it's okay to not be a dark-skinned blackfellow. It doesn't matter how important it is the culture and your connection with your community and your people around you. And basically, so I'm going to look at doing some workshops with kids throughout the year in between program days. And I've had a few Indigenous studies teachers also offer for me to come along and just sit in the classrooms with the kids. Yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. You know, like that's unreal. And I think our job is to be the start of these kids' journeys. They're kids. Hopefully they're going to be alive for another 50 or 60 years. And if they leave their time with us going, wow, being Aboriginal or being Torres Strait Islander is awesome, I'm going to go back and ask my nan and pop what the story is. I want to find out more. Like, it's not our job to do everything. Mentors, not saviors. Mentors, not saviors. And I think this is important in this place as well. Fill them up, get as much info as we can in for them, but they've got to do the work as well. Like, they're going to have to go and find out. We can't hold their hand all the way, but we can get them to a point where at least they know the change is from them seeing their identity as a reason for failure and a really bad thing to seeing it as a reason for success and a really good thing. If we can do that and they can see a bunch of people that actually show them that by turning up, that's the greatest gift we'll be able to give. And they'll be able to lean on that for the rest of their life and start their journey if they haven't already kickstarted it. And for those people who are really strong in their culture and where they come from, then we're going to give them even more superpower strengths with it to go, how good's this? Which is what AIME's a microcosm of this team. You know, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices and people in the team are just given so much weight and strength and respect for just purely who we are, let alone before we even start doing things. So it's a really great way to start your life when you have that sense that it's good who you are and where you come from.
And just another thing that I was talking about during interviews with some of the kids, that there's no shame at AIME, but then I went on to just explain that in all the hundreds of languages across Australia, not one of them do we have a word for shame. Shame is something that was developed and put on us as a way to keep us oppressed and to keep our culture dead. And when you say that things are shame, and when you say that being proud of Indigenous is being shame, you are killing your culture.
Yeah, Nate, that one is such a powerful sentence. One of the ways I've explained in the past, which I borrowed from Paul Sinclair, was if you look up the Bunjalung dictionary, there's no word for shame. You know, and then you say, insert the Anawan. You look up the Anawan dictionary and there's no word for shame. But if you look up the Oxford or the Cambridge dictionary, you find the word shame and it says to be inadequate or unworthy. Now, kids, you are anything but inadequate or unworthy. And they're the big mental blockers we've got to unlock. We do that, then I think we give the kids a pathway to move forward and want to talk to Nan and Pop. And Clark Webb, who was doing this thing with me at the beginning, Clark is now speaking fluent Gumbaynggirr back in Coffs Harbour. He wouldn't have been doing it if he wasn't doing this at the start, feeling that strength of wanting to go back. And this won't be the end game destination for many of us. Mabel, you might go start your own cultural awareness organisation in 5 years' time. And that'd be awesome, and then you can see gaps where maybe AIME doesn't quite do something and you can build off the back of the tapestry of what we're doing. So the more that we go together, AIME will do a certain amount and we'll be limited to do that certain amount, but hopefully we can build that foundation for people to grow and the future will then be strong, I fundamentally believe, if we keep doing that. Anything else anyone would like to add? Rabdrian, I should let you go and have a sleep.
Greetings, you all you guys. For me, it's more of a comment because I was going through the failure time activities that are listed there on the failure time. I realized it's not only about culture; it's also about human connections. Because like someone said there, I didn't see who said that, but when you say that some kids don't respond, sometimes kids don't respond well to verbal communication. Failure time is more like a non-verbal communication. It's like even if you're not saying anything, for me, I think failure time is also important in that it is more, it builds connection between people who are participating in any activity, because most of the activities requires that you work together as a group, and even if they are not responding when you are talking to them in the class or in the setup, they will respond to the game because they have to participate, and I think that's when.
Thank you, Vitali. Okay, I might wrap us up there, team. I'm going to post this on Failure Time, so feel free to, Shawnee, good dancing. Feel free to keep asking questions. It's how we keep learning and growing together. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll chat to you all soon. Failure Time, to conclude, failure time is it's not for fun. It's critical. It is the most important thing that we can do. It's where the learning I really think can happen. That's where we weight our most important pieces in failure time. And kids' identity is a really, really, really important thing for us to hold up as a strength. And if we keep doing that again and again, how do we do training between two different groups? Well, as much as possible, we put them in safe arenas to build relationships, and we try and facilitate that relationship to happen. Then we watch it and we respond if something doesn't work accordingly, and then we adapt and keep developing. So that's that'd be my summary for how we do this stuff. Okay? Right, team. Have yourself a good arvo. Well done.